Hey everybody, Josh Sigurdson, a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen. And I know many of you can't wait to see who is going to take over as the chair of the Federal Reserve. Actually, I'm joking. Nobody cares because it doesn't matter. The bottom line is a central planner is a central planner is a central planner, and it's going to perpetuate all the things that we've seen for many years before. The script is already written, people, but let's look at who is basically probably going to be the people that we're going to be complaining about in the near future. So, of course, Yellen's chair ends in, her term ends in February 2018, and right now, leading the pack is John B. Taylor and Jerome Powell. Now, starting off with John B. Taylor, he was a professor of economics at Princeton. He has a George P. Shultz Senior Fellow in economics at Stanford University's Hoover Institution. He's good personal friends with Alan Greenspan, of course, former chair of the Fed. And Taylor then also has developed the staggered contract model of overlapping wage and price setting, which became one of the building blocks of the new Keynesian macroeconomics. Now, moving on to Jerome Powell, if that hasn't bored you to death. So, Jerome Powell is on the Board of Governors at the Federal Reserve. His term expires in 2028. He was appointed in 2014. And Powell served as an assistant secretary and as undersecretary of the Treasury under President George H.W. Bush, with responsibility for policy on financial institutions, the Treasury debt market, and related areas. He was a partner at the Carlyle Group for 8 years, and he's was associate for the investment bank Dillon Read and Co. So, with that said, like I said, it doesn't really matter. But John, what do you think is going to happen in the coming months?
Well, what's going to happen is, of course, we're going to see, as we saw now, the current chair, Janet Yellen, is out. And she's the first Fed chair in about, I think it's 5 or 6 Fed chairs that haven't gotten a second term, which is quite interesting. But she's, had some delusional statements. But she's not... In my point of view, she probably is not the worst. Ben Bernanke, really created massive havoc. And then, of course, Alan Greenspan, which is John B. Taylor's buddy. He also lowered interest rate quite substantially in 2001, like during the dot-com bubble, creating this whole thing where they believe that they can, keep on, lowering this interest rate in order to fix the economy. So I think we're just going to see more of this. Like, we have a Keynesian, and then we have a Keynesian, I would say, that is an investment banker.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just going back over the decades, I feel like probably the least harmful was probably Paul Volcker, but still extremely harmful. I mean, looking at Alan Greenspan, while he is an incredibly smart person, and he knows everything that we speak about here at WAM. He knows all these things.
He said gold is money.
I think he's just a terrible person. Looking at when he was the chair, he spoke of on numerous occasions about how, the Federal Reserve answers to no government, and he basically set it out in stone. He didn't really care. He went out and said, yeah, we basically run the whole show. No one can really tell us what to do.
What is the proper relationship? What should be the proper relationship between a chairman of the Fed and a president of the United States?
Well, first of all, the Federal Reserve is an independent agency, and that means basically that there is no other agency of government which can overrule actions that we take.
There are a few things that the president can do, but very minor compared to the large scale of things at the Federal Reserve. Looking at Ben Bernanke, we were just talking about this before we turned on the camera. Ben Bernanke, I think it was 2007, said that, the economy is going to be great going forward. Everything's fine. Everything's going to be fine. And then, of course, we saw the recession follow that up by, I think, a few months, actually. And then the same goes for Janet Yellen, who was in hospital for a medical ailment that I'm not going to go into here because it's a little inappropriate. You can look it up. I'm sure you will.
It was a urinary tract infection. And then, of course, you came out with a delusional statement as we were talking about.
Okay. Anyway, so it causes people to have, some mental issues and be unable to really I guess you could say,
become delusional.
it stops people from making reasonable points. And she, right before she went to the hospital, said something along the lines of, "We will not see another monetary crisis in our lifetime," which is the definition of delusional. Because as we are seeing currency printed out of thin air. Fiat is always going to, and has historically always, fallen to its intrinsic value of zero. It always has, always will. And, when you look at the fact that fiat is going on, I think, the 1,000th anniversary from 1024 AD in China, we see this perpetuated time and time again, and nothing changes. And I guess we can just further go into the problems of fiat with a lack of much more to say about the Fed chair, considering the fact that it's not going to change anything.
Yeah, well, the Keynesians believe that, of course, you can take money and then use a deficit spending in the government to create money into existence, and then it goes out into the banking system, then tenfolds plus in the banking system. And as there's more and more debt accumulated, they want to create more debt in order to pay off the old debt, and they only pay off the interest, not the principal, of course. So what they believe is that they can continue this cycle of devaluing the dollar or any other currency in order to devalue the debt. So by devaluing the debt becomes cheaper, so they can continue this game. But they believe that they can do it forever, which has shown so many times throughout history that this is a trust game. And when that trust is broken, it takes within a year time that their currency becomes worthless. So that's what we're going to see here, is more of these policies trying to, especially now in 2018, I think that's when we're going to see something really big. They're really desperately trying to push it out as much as they can, but there's so much overvaluations in markets, in debt, everywhere. And how are they going to continue on this massive bubble that they created, right?
Yeah, well, absolutely. They are desperately pushing it off. And, I wouldn't even say 2018. I think it's dangerous territory to say dates because, as we've gone into before, the fundamentals are off the table due to the level of manipulation in the monetary system.
Should.
Yeah, it should. It should have happened in 2012 as well. It should have happened in September 2015 and 2016. Yeah, and we should have seen it really completely collapse in 2008, but we didn't. The reason for that is because they just central plan everything. They've gotten so good at just central planning everything into oblivion that they can set it off as long as they humanly can. And the fact is, you just can't go by fundamentals anymore. And we've seen that with the level of, they're desperately trying to push those interest rates up just enough to be able to drop them out when the dollar goes down, but they can't because there's
have
just
to drop them into negative territory.
Absolutely, they'd have to drop it into negative territory,
but
and
they need a cashless society first.
Exactly, and that's what I'm getting at here is that. What they are trying to push towards is that global IMF SDR global currency, the special drawing rights world currency. They want to make everything cashless. And we see the test runs in India with the Aadhaar system with retina scans and fingerprints. We see that in Australia with the facial recognition passports, the whole technocratic system. We see that in China with their cashless system that they are pushing hardcore right now. Sweden with, RFIDs, and it goes on.
Well, RBI, it was a news article that I just read recently, said that it was not mandatory for you when you get a bank account that you need to connect your biometrics from the Aadhaar system into your bank account. Yeah. So there you go. Like now it's full scale technocratic control grid that they implemented.
Yeah, absolutely. And the IMF wants to move to Beijing in the next few years, as they've mentioned, and it's a perfect storm. The U.S. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin just recently announced that he's threatening that he's pushing China off the U.S. dollar. They can no longer use it anymore, which is a perfect situation for China.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's why countries around the world are swapping out of the U.S. dollar. There's a massive crash coming. Fundamentals are off the table, but it's coming. We know it's going to happen. We just can't put a date on it because the fundamentals are so far off the table. But we know that it's going to happen. Therefore, it's better to be over-prepared than under-prepared because this is a very scary system and it's going to bring down the global economy.
Yeah, we'll watch our latest video that we did on the balance sheets of central banks. There you get the cold hard facts there. Since 2008, the Federal Reserve, about 550% increase in assets on their balance sheet, and a lot of that is just bad assets that they had to buy up from the banks. It's a massive bailout. That's what the whole balance sheet increase has been. So now what you're seeing is they're starting to max out, and they don't know what to do. They're like an investor that didn't think about their exit strategy when they bought an investment, and then what they don't understand is that nobody wants their investment, so who are they going to exit and sell it to? Well, maybe the the IMF and the special drawing rights will suck up all the bad toxic assets and do a massive global bank bailout, but then devalue all the currencies.
Yeah, there's a little bit of stupidity involved. I mean, look, there's a lot of people within the central banking system that know exactly what they're doing, and they're doing it on purpose. But I think that there is some volume of, not understanding why everything's going wrong at a faster rate than they expected. And I think it's a little bit getting out of their hands, which is kind of good news for us, because if that happens, they can push into the next big system, the cashless system, as we were talking about, soon enough, and then everything's going to come crumbling down, and hopefully people are educated enough to not fall right into their tricks once again, as we've seen for the last 1,000 years. So going into solutions, John, I think it's really important.
Well, just before we end this, the current system is a one-trick pony. You just got to keep on printing money.
Yeah, well, exactly. It's all magic, wizardry. Yeah. Anyway, so going into solutions, there's food, water, shelter, defense, so you're not gathering things for the toughest guy on the block, as we often say. And, of course, you got to look towards assets and stuff like gold and silver, cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, decentralized, diversification. Stay off the centralized grid, folks. Stay away from fiat currency as much as you humanly can. And make sure that you are educated, because with education comes action, and with action comes an actual difference without depending on politicians who follow the same scripts to do everything for you. You have to do it yourself. Self-sustainability and financial responsibility is incredibly important.
Yeah, and we need to learn the rules from history, from the past. There's hundreds, thousand examples throughout history of how the system will fail, because it's driven by the perpetuation of creating debt into existence and then charging an interest that doesn't exist. And when everybody is in debt, where are you going to get that new interest payments from? You need more people indebted, but you don't have any more people in debt. So then the whole system collapses in on itself. We saw that. It goes all the way back to China in 1024. They were talking about how they had a massive boom. They called it the crazy boom that they had in the Chinese economy in the Song Dynasty. And then what happened was when everybody started to get indebted, there was nobody left that they could indebt. So the whole system came collapsing down, and that's what we're seeing right now. Just massive amounts of debt everywhere, and there's no way to ever pay this debt back, and it has to collapse.
Well, I mean, the banking system loves debt because, of course, it benefits them hugely. It profits them hugely.
That's their business plan.
Absolutely. And the government loves debt because a populace in debt is a populace in servitude. They bend the knee very easily, which is why governments and banks go hand in hand and work so well together, because they work in order to destroy the individualism and the sustainability of the populace.
The reason why we have a middle class is because of debt, Josh. It was created out of debt. Everybody in the middle class is in massive amounts, substantial amounts of debt. And the reason why is because the banks lend out money to poor people back in the day. And then suddenly these poor people, were productive, created things. And then they're sitting around, with a lot more money. But some of the middle class is so heavily indebted, it's ridiculous. Unless you're maybe a smart business person that you don't have any debt, which it would be fantastic. But that's the major reason for the rise of any middle class is the creation of debt, and that's what you see in China and other places right now that didn't really have that middle class.
Absolutely. And for those that are new to WHAM, make sure to check out John's book, The End of Freedom: How Our Monetary System Enslaves Us, which goes deep into this, as well as Canada, the Greatest Economy in the World, ? Both on Amazon.com. We haven't gotten an ad in on that as much as we should have recently. But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. And until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson and John Sneisen signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth.
Be the change.
Thanks for watching, everyone. Check the links below. GoFundMe, Patreon. We can't do it without you. Any donation is very much appreciated, especially as we are so vastly demonetized by the Anti-Defamation League on YouTube as they flag all of our content as hate speech. You can also find our Bitcoin address in the description in the comments as well as on the screen for you to scan if you please. You can also find me at Josh Sigurdson at steemit.com. That's steemit.com, the future of social media, as the dinosaur social media digs its own grave. You get paid in cryptocurrency, Steem that is, on steemit.com via the upvote of your posts, so I hope to see you there. But until next time, this is Josh Sigurdson signing out from World Alternative Media. Find the truth, be the change.
Thank you.